April 24th, 2013, 8 a.m. As the morning sun rose over the dusty streets of Dhaka, the Rana Plaza building slowly stirred. Hundreds of workers waited outside, lined up to carry out their boss's orders. The cracks in the walls, noticed the day before, puzzled the workers, but who could speak up? "The cracks don't matter," the factory manager had said the day before. "If you don't work, you don't get paid." A young woman, Amina, walked in with a small sewing machine bag on her back. She was a mother of 3 and had a hungry family waiting for her at home. Lost in her thoughts, she was startled by the foreman shouting over her head, "Amina, faster, don't waste time." The building shook eerily as the workers sat down at the machines. A thin, staccato sound echoed, as if the concrete walls were groaning. Most tried to ignore the noise, as everyone knew they could not afford to lose. They had to work. Worked as usual. The fluorescent lights above the ceiling shook slightly. Some of the workers stopped and looked up. Rafiq, one of the foremen, muttered worriedly, "This feeling is not normal." Just then, a cracking sound from the right wall froze everyone. After a short silence, a rumbling came from the lower floors of the building. Screams rose. People jumped out of their seats. The building shook like a giant, tearing itself apart. Everything happened suddenly. A huge explosion echoed through the ground, and the building began to collapse like a tower of paper. Amina quickly turned around and tried to escape, but she was trapped in the crowd. Dust covered the room like a blanket. Darkness enveloped everything. "Help!" Amina cried, but her voice was nothing more than a muffled echo. All around her, machinery fell over. Iron beams swayed left and right. She couldn't feel her arm. The dust burned her lungs and each breath became harder and harder. Minutes later, an overwhelming silence fell over the wreckage. Time seemed to stand still. The moans and muffled whispers of the workers trapped beneath the rubble could be heard. A mother's desperate cry, a child's silent prayer, a worker's cry for help. Amina closed her eyes. She thought of her children. She had a reason to stay alive, but here, in this dark tomb, hope was fading. When the rescue teams arrived, a desperate crowd had gathered on the rubble. Everyone was looking for someone close to them. Some people's hands were bleeding as they dug through the rubble. Others whispered desperately for names. It took 3 days to get Amina out. When she was pulled out, she had lost an arm, but she was reunited with her children. The same could not be said for thousands of other workers. The causes that led to the collapse of Rana Plaza were a combination of human error and systematic violations. Structural defects. Rana Plaza was designed for commercial use, but was converted into textile factories with heavy machinery. Substandard materials were used in the construction, and building safety standards were not followed. Overloading. The machinery and heavy labour in the factories exceeded the design limits of the building. Workers were forced to continue production, despite the cracks discovered on April 23rd. Lack of inspection. Bangladesh's building safety and labour rights oversight mechanisms were weak. Local government and employers prioritised cost savings over safety. Fast fashion pressure. Global fast fashion brands' demand for lower costs led manufacturers to neglect worker safety and building standards. The Rana Plaza disaster had far-reaching consequences. Human loss. 1,134 people were killed and over 2,500 injured. The majority of the injured suffered physical disabilities and psychological trauma. Economic devastation. Many workers lost their jobs. Bangladesh's garment industry has been the target of global criticism. Social impact. The disaster raised awareness of workers' rights and safety. There have been calls for boycotts and reforms of the garment industry. Environmental damage. Debris from the building collapse polluted the environment. Actions that can be taken to prevent similar tragedies. 1. Strong oversight mechanisms. Ensure that all factories comply with building safety regulations. Regular inspections should be carried out by independent auditing organisations. 2. Strengthen legislation. Governments should make occupational safety standards a legal obligation. Strict laws on workers' rights and safety should be enacted. 3. Pressure fast fashion companies. Global brands should demand that factories in their supply chains comply with safety standards, promote more transparent and ethical production processes. Fourth, train workers. Workers should be trained in evacuation and safety procedures in case of danger. They should be given the opportunity to report instances of deteriorating working conditions. 5. Consumer awareness. People need to understand the consequences of fast fashion consumption habits. More ethical and sustainable shopping options should be promoted.